There's a protein holding your face together right now. Starting in your mid-20s, your body makes about 1% less of it every single year. By the time most people notice it, they've already lost close to a third. The industry built a billion-dollar answer. Jars, serums, powders. Problem is, collagen molecules are widely considered too large to cross the skin barrier. You can rub them on all day. Most of it isn't getting in. What actually rebuilds that scaffolding starts at the dinner table. Tonight, 16 foods that hand your body the raw material and the tools to do that job from the inside. Number 12 is what my grandmother simmered for 2 days straight. Turns out she understood something about joints that a lot of modern diets got badly wrong. Number 10 has more of one mineral your collagen crew cannot function without than almost anything else in a standard kitchen. I spent over 20 years as a registered nurse before I came out to this homestead in rural Oregon. I still read a plate of food the way I used to read a chart. Nothing here replaces your doctor, especially if you're managing a wound or a joint condition. What I'm sharing is what the research says, and what 20 years at the bedside taught me to notice. Let's get into it. Number 1. The red bell pepper sitting in your crisper drawer right now. Ounce for ounce, a red bell pepper carries close to 3 times the vitamin C of an orange, and vitamin C is the one nutrient your body cannot finish building new collagen without. Picture the collagen fiber like a rope, 3 strands twisted into a cable. Before that cable holds its shape, 2 of the building blocks, proline and lysine, have to get stitched into place. Vitamin C does the stitching. Without enough of it, the rope stays loose, unraveled. That's not a theory. It's the exact mechanism behind scurvy. Sailors on long voyages with no fresh produce had wounds that wouldn't close and gums that fell apart because their bodies simply couldn't finish assembling the collagen. The stitching crew ran out of thread. There's also this. Vitamin C is water-soluble, which means your body doesn't store it the way it does fat-soluble vitamins. Whatever you don't use, you pass along by the end of the day. So the goal isn't one massive dose once a week. It's a small, steady supply, showing up at the table most days. A fresh bell pepper handles that better than almost any supplement bottle. Signs of genuinely running low are easy to miss. Cuts that take a beat longer to close than they used to. Gums that bleed a little more than they should. Bruises turning up from bumps you barely remember. None of that means anything dramatic. It just means the stitching crew is running short on thread, and the rebuild is slowing down quietly before anything more obvious shows up. I grow these in raised beds along the south fence, where they get the most sun of anything I plant. Stubborn things. They sulk for weeks, then ripen all at once. The orange and yellow varieties carry a bit less vitamin C than the red, but they're still worth growing. Red is what you want if you're specifically thinking about tonight's topic. Slice 1 raw into a salad, and you've done more for that stitching process than most vitamin C tablets manage, because whole food comes bundled with compounds that help your body use the vitamin better than the isolated form alone. Number 2 delivers even more of that same vitamin, in a fruit most people still think of as a specialty item. Number 2. Guava. Guava holds more vitamin C than almost any fruit you can name, by some measurements, over 4 times an orange in the same size serving. And that matters here because the stitching your skin, joints, and gut lining need isn't a one-time event. It happens constantly, every day, and the supply of stitching material needs to be replenished just as constantly. Your skin alone turns over its collagen scaffolding on a timescale of years, not weeks. So a fruit that delivers this much of the key building nutrient, reliably, every time you eat it, is doing genuinely useful ongoing work. Think of it less like a repair job and more like maintenance on a structure you'll be living in for decades. You're not patching one crack. You're keeping the whole thing in a state where it can keep patching itself, day after day, with the right materials on hand. Most people get enough vitamin C to avoid obvious deficiency, but enough to avoid deficiency and enough to keep collagen production running at capacity are not the same threshold. The research suggests there's meaningful room between those 2 numbers for most adults eating a typical Western diet. Guava also carries antioxidant compounds that studies suggest help protect the collagen you've already built from ordinary sun exposure and pollution. So you're not just supplying thread for new rope, you're guarding the rope you've already got. If you can't find it fresh where you live, frozen guava pulp works nearly as well and keeps for months in the freezer. Something available beats the perfect version you're still waiting on. One myth worth clearing up because it comes up often. Vitamin C doesn't vanish the moment a food touches heat. Cooking reduces it, yes, but a cooked guava still beats most raw foods on tonight's entire list. Don't let the raw-only idea talk you out of a spoonful of guava jam in February, when fresh guava simply isn't sitting on the shelf where you live. Something is almost always better than the perfect version you never quite get around to. Number 3 gives you that same vitamin alongside a gut benefit most people overlook entirely. Number 3, kiwi. One kiwi carries more vitamin C than an orange of the same size and delivers it alongside fiber that feeds the gut bacteria your body depends on to absorb the nutrients your collagen synthesis runs on. It's an emerging area of research, and I won't overstate it, but a settled, well-fed gut absorbs things like vitamin C noticeably better than an irritated one does. That matters practically, because you can eat every food on tonight's list and still shortchange yourself if absorption is consistently poor. The fiber in kiwi is a two-type mix, soluble and insoluble, which means it's working on two different parts of the digestive system at the same time. That pairing, the collagen-building vitamin, and the gut support for absorbing it in one small piece of fruit is exactly how whole food tends to outperform a list of isolated supplements. Worth knowing, too, the kiwi plant is native to the river valleys of southern China, where various parts of the plant appear in historical botanical records well before the fruit became a commercial crop. I find that pattern interesting, plants finding their way into use before anyone had the tools to explain why. I eat mine skin, and almost mornings. Takes some getting used to, the texture especially, but the skin carries a good share of the fiber, and I don't like wasting the best part. Gold kiwi, the yellow-fleshed variety, actually carries a higher vitamin C concentration than the standard green, and a milder flavor that makes eating the skin considerably less of a mental hurdle. If you found green kiwi too tart to enjoy regularly, the gold variety is worth trying. Either works for tonight's purposes. Store them at room temperature until they give slightly to pressure, then move them to the refrigerator. Kiwi that's been ripened properly and then chilled holds its vitamin C better than a hard, underripe fruit sitting in a cold crisper for weeks. Next up, something from the spice rack that most people use every week without knowing what it's doing inside the body. Number 4, garlic. Garlic works a completely different angle from vitamin C. If vitamin C is the thread stitching the collagen strands together, the sulfur compounds in garlic are closer to rivets, locking neighboring fibers side by side so the whole sheet holds together under load, instead of sliding apart under pressure. Researchers point to sulfur-rich allium vegetables, garlic, onions, leeks, as the dietary source for the raw material behind those crosslinks. The sharp smell when you crush a clove is quite literally the sulfur releasing, which means if there's no smell, the benefit isn't fully forming either. Here's something most people get backwards. The compound responsible for this doesn't actually exist in an intact garlic clove. It only forms when the cell walls are broken by crushing, chopping, or biting. Crush it, then let it sit 5 minutes before cooking, and you get considerably more of those active compounds than you would from a whole clove dropped straight into a hot pan. Heat stops the reaction. That 5-minute window, before the pan, is when it's still forming. Once those compounds have developed in that short window, moderate cooking doesn't eliminate them entirely, but the heat does slow their continued production, which is why crushing ahead of time matters. Raw garlic delivers the full amount. Lightly cooked garlic still delivers something meaningful. Whole garlic cloves roasted for an hour, while delicious, are working considerably less of this angle by the time they're soft enough to spread. Worth knowing if tonight's topic is your main reason for reaching for it. I keep a braid of dried garlic hanging in the mudroom, pulled from last summer's harvest, and I take off a bulb most nights without thinking about it. Onions and leeks work the same angle. Garlic just concentrates those sulfur compounds more heavily than most of its relatives. So if raw garlic genuinely doesn't suit you, a good handful of sliced onions cooked down into almost anything still puts sulfur on the table. Broccoli, next, works this same angle, but adds a second mechanism on top. 2 jobs from one vegetable. Number 5, broccoli. Broccoli does double duty. It carries a solid dose of vitamin C more than you'd expect from a vegetable that color, for the same stitching process we've already covered. And as a cruciferous vegetable, it brings its own sulfur compounds, working the same cross-linking angle garlic just covered. 2 mechanisms. 1 plate. Steam it rather than boil. Boiling pulls a good portion of the vitamin C straight out into the water. You'd be pouring part of tonight's list down the drain. That's not a small difference. Research on cooking methods consistently finds steaming retains meaningfully more vitamin C than boiling, because the vegetable never sits in water that's actively pulling the vitamin out. Broccoli sprouts are worth knowing about too. They concentrate those sulfur compounds considerably more densely than the full-grown vegetable. Some research suggests the sprout stage carries substantially higher concentrations in a much smaller amount of food. If the taste of regular broccoli has never quite won you over, a spoonful of sprouts on a sandwich covers the same ground, in less volume, with less argument at the table. You can grow them yourself in a jar on the counter in about 5 days from seed. No soil, no garden bed. Just a jar and a mesh lid. That's genuinely useful to know if you live somewhere winter makes a garden impossible, and you want a fresh, living food source without depending on what's sitting on a shelf at the grocery store in January. Honestly, I couldn't tell you anymore whether it was my mother or her sister who used to make me sit at the table until my broccoli was gone. The memory's gone soft around the edges. What I can tell you is I've come around to it decades later, roasted with olive oil and garlic, which conveniently doubles down on everything we've covered in the last 2 items. Number 6 turns the whole story toward protecting the collagen you've already built. This one surprised me when I first read the research. Number 6. Tomatoes. Everything covered so far tonight has been about building new collagen. Tomatoes work the other side of that problem, protecting what you've already built. They're rich in lycopene, the pigment that gives them their color, and lycopene appears to act like an internal shield against the kind of UV damage that breaks existing collagen down. In a 12-week randomized controlled trial, women eating about 55 grams of tomato paste daily, roughly 3.5 tablespoons, showed a measurable drop in the collagen-degrading protein that UV exposure normally sends spiking. Their skin also showed increased procollagen deposition by the end of the study. That's a meaningful finding. The tomatoes weren't just reducing one damage signal, they were also supporting the signal for new collagen formation at the same time. One thing that genuinely surprised me when I went through this research, cooking tomatoes doesn't hurt them here. It actually helps. The lycopene in cooked tomato paste is better absorbed than lycopene in raw tomatoes because the heat breaks down the cell walls that would otherwise lock most of it in. A jar of crushed tomatoes, slow-cooked in olive oil, delivers more usable lycopene than a fresh tomato eaten straight off the vine. The fat matters too. Lycopene is fat-soluble, so a little olive oil in the same pan makes a real difference to absorption. This is one of the clearer examples in the whole food literature of context-changing bioavailability. The same tomato, prepared differently, delivers a meaningfully different amount of the useful compound to your bloodstream. A raw tomato slice on a dry salad, a slow-cooked tomato sauce in olive oil. Same food, quite different result downstream. It's also worth noting that the women in that 12-week trial weren't eating fresh heirloom tomatoes from a farmer's market. They were eating commercial tomato paste from a tube. Affordable, year-round, no special sourcing required. That's the kind of research finding that actually translates to a real kitchen, which is why I mentioned it. One honest note before we move on. Tomatoes and sunscreen are not the same thing, and I'm not telling you to trade one for the other. Think of this as backup, not a replacement. Keep the hat and the SPF. Add the tomatoes. Number 7 uses a completely different color pigment to do a similar defensive job, and you can grow it on a bush in your own yard. Number 7. Blueberries. Blueberries get their deep color from compounds called anthocyanins, and these have been studied specifically in skin cells exposed to UV damage. In cell-level research, anthocyanin extracts from blueberries block the same collagen-degrading proteins we saw with tomatoes, while at the same time upregulating the signal for new collagen production. Two-front defense, slow the breakdown, support the rebuild at the same time. That combination is genuinely difficult to get from a single isolated compound. It's the kind of result that tends to emerge from the whole food rather than any one piece of it pulled out and put in a capsule. Wild blueberries carry more anthocyanins than the large cultivated ones you typically find in grocery stores, Smaller berries have more skin relative to flesh, and the anthocyanins concentrate in the skin. But frozen cultivated blueberries work well for this purpose. Freezing doesn't damage anthocyanins the way heat does. A bag of frozen blueberries from the store is a perfectly good option year-round, and it costs a fraction of what the fresh ones run in January. One practical nuance worth mentioning: heating blueberries into a jam or a baked good does reduce the anthocyanin content, sometimes substantially depending on the temperature and duration. Fresh or frozen and thawed keeps the most. Stirred into oatmeal after the oats have cooled slightly preserves more than cooking them in from the start. Small things, but if you're eating them specifically for this purpose, it's worth knowing which preparation is actually delivering what you think it is. I've got 2 blueberry bushes out past the chicken coop, cuttings from a friend at church, going on 6 years now. There's something I genuinely find moving about a plant that hands you a basket of fruit every single summer and asks for nothing back but a little pruning. A blessing, plain and simple, however you want to explain the biology underneath it. Number 8 brings vitamin C back into the picture, in a fruit everyone already reaches for, but with an extra layer of protection most people have never heard of. Number 8. Strawberries. A cup of strawberries delivers close to a full day's worth of vitamin C for most adults, right back to that stitching process we started with. But strawberries also carry ellagic acid, compound researchers have been looking at, primarily in laboratory and animal studies so far, for its potential role in reducing the kind of UV-related damage that quietly accelerates collagen breakdown over years. The human evidence is still developing, and I won't claim more than the research currently supports. That combination, the building nutrient and the protection against what breaks it down, in the same handful of fruit, is exactly the kind of pairing that makes whole food consistently more useful than chasing nutrients individually. One practical note: the vitamin C in strawberries degrades faster than most people realize once they're cut and sitting out. Slice them fresh and eat them the same day. A bowl of whole strawberries in the refrigerator holds its vitamin C considerably longer than a pre-cut container left in the crisper. Fresh is meaningfully better here than preserved for the vitamin C content specifically. Heat and time both wear it down. A spoonful of good strawberry preserves in oatmeal on a January morning is still worth doing for other reasons, but it's not the same food nutritionally as a fresh June berry straight off the plant. Ellagic acid, on the other hand, holds up through moderate processing better than vitamin C does. So if you're primarily interested in the protective angle rather than the stitching angle, preserved or cooked strawberries aren't a complete loss, they're just delivering a different portion of the total benefit. Understanding which mechanism you're feeding helps you make better decisions with what's actually available to you in any given season. A note on frozen strawberries. Like blueberries, freezing preserves the ellagic acid content very well. The vitamin C drops somewhat during the freeze-thaw process, but the protective compound holds up, which makes frozen strawberries a reasonable year-round option for the collagen-guarding side of tonight's equation, even when fresh aren't available. I put up strawberry preserves every June, not because the jar matches a fresh berry nutritionally, but because a spoonful of something you grew and made yourself on a dark February morning does something for you that a nutrition chart can't quite account for. Call it morale, call it gratitude. Either way, it belongs in the pantry. Number 9. The orange, a red bell pepper, beats an orange for vitamin C. I said that at the top, and it's true. But I don't want that comparison to talk you out of oranges, because they are the most reliable, most affordable, most universally available source of that stitching nutrient you'll find in any grocery store, in any season, anywhere in this country. Being there, reliably, most days of the week, matters more than being the highest number on a comparison chart. Oranges also carry hesperidin and nerorootin, flavonoids well documented in oranges specifically, studied for their role in supporting the small blood vessels that deliver nutrients to skin and underlying tissue in the first place. None of tonight's list works as intended if that delivery system is sluggish or compromised, and these 2 compounds appear to support the vessel walls that carry all of it where it needs to go. A word on juice. Commercial orange juice, particularly the kind sitting in a refrigerated carton for several weeks, has lost a notable portion of its vitamin C compared to a fresh whole orange. The hesperidin and naringenin hold up somewhat better, but the vitamin C, which is the main reason most people associate oranges with this topic in the first place, degrades with time and oxygen exposure. A whole orange, eaten within a few days of purchase, consistently beats a glass of bottled juice for tonight's purposes. The fiber also disappears in the juice, which is another reason to eat the fruit rather than drink it. One practical note worth mentioning, since we're a third of the way through: if you're managing several prescription medications, it's worth asking your pharmacist whether large amounts of citrus fit safely into your routine. Grapefruit, in particular, is well documented to interact with certain drugs, not oranges specifically, but the category is worth raising with whoever manages your prescriptions. One orange most days covers a healthy adult's baseline vitamin C needs. Everything past that is a bonus. Number 10. Cashews. And here's that mineral I mentioned back at the start. Cashews are one of the better everyday sources of copper, and copper does something none of the foods we've covered so far can do. Think back to the sulfur rivets from garlic, those bonds holding neighboring collagen fibers side by side. Copper activates the specific worker protein that physically installs those rivets. Without copper, that crew doesn't show up. It doesn't matter how much sulfur is available or how well the vitamin C stitching is going, the cross-linking that makes the whole scaffolding rigid and load-bearing simply doesn't happen at full capacity. Research going back decades has established this clearly. Copper-deficient animals show measurably weaker connective tissue across the board, bone, tendon, vessel walls, all of it. The copper in cashews isn't doing something exotic. It's operating the piece of the assembly line that makes everything else structurally useful. A small handful of raw cashews most days is enough to make a meaningful contribution. Unsalted, the sodium in the roasted and salted kind adds up faster than most people track. True copper deficiency is genuinely uncommon in people eating a varied diet. The body is reasonably efficient at holding on to what it gets from food. Where it tends to actually appear is in people eating very restricted diets, recovering from certain gut surgeries, or, and this becomes important in a moment, taking high-dose zinc supplements long-term without realizing the two minerals compete for the same absorption route. The food sources we're talking about tonight rarely push copper into problematic territory in either direction. It's supplement stacking, without guidance, that tends to create the imbalances worth worrying about. Brazil nuts, pumpkin seeds, and dark chocolate all carry copper too. If cashews don't suit you, good quality cocoa is one of the richer sources most people never think to count. Number 11 is where copper meets its competition, in a seed most people only think about at Halloween. Number 11. Pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are one of the better plant sources of zinc, and zinc turns up in almost every stage of the collagen rebuilding process, from the cells that manufacture new collagen directly to the immune response that clears damaged tissue before rebuilding can even start. A quarter cup gets a healthy adult a meaningful portion of their daily zinc needs. Here's what's worth knowing before you go adding a zinc supplement on top. Zinc and copper share the same absorption door in your gut. Too much supplemental zinc over time can quietly crowd out copper absorption, which works directly against the cross-linking work we just covered with the cashews. Food sources rarely cause that imbalance on their own. High-dose supplements taken daily without a reason sometimes do. If you're already taking zinc for another purpose, that's worth a conversation with your doctor before layering more of it on top through supplements. The food is fine. The supplements are where the trade-off lives. Lightly toast the seeds before eating them if you can. It breaks down compounds in the raw seed that otherwise reduce how much zinc your body actually takes in. Those compounds are called phytates, and they bind to zinc and a handful of other minerals in the gut, carrying them out before they can be absorbed. Soaking raw seeds overnight in water and then rinsing them has a similar effect, and some people find that easier to work into a routine than toasting. Either approach is better than eating them straight from a raw bag if you're specifically eating them for tonight's reasons. A small kitchen step with a real result, and one that takes almost no effort once it becomes habit. For those who don't enjoy pumpkin seeds specifically, zinc shows up in other foods too. Oysters carry more zinc per serving than almost anything else in a standard diet, though most people aren't eating them regularly. Beef, dark chicken meat, chickpeas, and cashews all contribute meaningfully. The goal isn't to source zinc from a single food, a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds, a serving of beef a couple of times a week, chickpeas in a soup. It adds up without requiring anyone to count milligrams at every meal. That's what a varied diet is actually doing for you, quietly, in the background. Number 12, bone broth. The one my grandmother spent 2 days on. Everything we've covered so far has been a tool or a helper. Vitamin C for stitching, copper for cross-linking, zinc for the broader toolbox. Bone broth is different. This isn't a cofactor or a mineral. This is closer to the raw rope fiber itself. The amino acids glycine and proline, sourced directly from connective tissue, already partway toward the form your body needs to weave straight into new collagen. That's genuinely different from plant-based protein sources, and it's what my grandmother understood through practice, that a long, slow simmer pulls more from bones than anything short and rushed, and the research on amino acid extraction supports that in general terms. I want to be honest with you, though, because that's the whole point of this channel. Research comparing home-prepared bone broth to collagen supplements found the amino acid content varies enormously from batch to batch and often comes in considerably lower than people assume, sometimes well below a single serving of a measured hydrolyzed collagen product. A study published in the International Journal of Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism found that even the most carefully prepared broth didn't reliably match therapeutic collagen doses. The broth is still nutritious. It still provides real food, real minerals, real warmth on a cold morning, and that counts for something. But I won't overstate what it is, because the research doesn't support the version of bone broth that gets sold as a complete collagen solution on its own. A longer simmer, 18 to 24 hours, with a splash of vinegar to help pull minerals from the bone, consistently produces a richer result than anything faster. A pressure cooker closes most of that gap if 2 days on the back burner isn't realistic. Honestly, I couldn't tell you anymore whether it was my grandmother or her sister who taught me to save every chicken carcass for the stock pot. The details gone fuzzy, the way kitchen memories do. But the lesson stuck. Nothing wasted. Everything simmered down to its last use. There's something almost devotional about that kind of kitchen work. Number 13 gives you those same building blocks from something most people already keep in the refrigerator door without giving it a second thought. Number 13, eggs. Eggs carry proline, one of the two main amino acid building blocks that go directly into the collagen structure, alongside sulfur-containing amino acids that tie back into the cross-linking work garlic and broccoli were doing earlier. They're also a reliable source of biotin, which tends to travel with the nutrients most people associate with hair, nail, and skin integrity. A body running low on one of these often turns out to be running low on several at once, which is one reason eggs show up consistently in dietary research on connective tissue. They're doing several jobs at once for the price of a carton of eggs. The yolk carries the fat-soluble nutrients, including most of the biotin and much of the overall nutritional density people associate with eggs. The white carries most of the total protein by weight, though proline and other amino acids relevant to tonight's topic are distributed across both. Eating the whole egg, as opposed to just the whites, gives you access to both sides of that nutritional profile. The concern about egg yolks and cholesterol that dominated nutrition advice for several decades has been substantially revised. Current guidance from most major dietary authorities no longer singles out egg yolk cholesterol as a primary risk factor for most healthy adults, and the broader nutritional context of the whole egg has been rehabilitated considerably in the research. A common myth worth setting aside: the color of an eggshell tells you nothing about the nutrition inside. Brown versus white is purely about the breed of hen. What actually moves the needle is the hen's diet and whether she has access to diverse forage. Pasture-raised eggs from hens eating varied food genuinely run a bit richer in several nutrients than the standard supermarket carton, though the difference is more modest than some sources claim. A couple of eggs a few mornings a week is a reasonable, low-effort contribution to several of tonight's mechanisms at once. My hens are laying well this season, 6 of them, mostly Rhode Island Reds, though there's one barred rock who runs the whole coop and doesn't let anyone forget it. Number 14 takes us to a mineral that almost nobody associates with skin, in a breakfast food most people eat without a second thought. Number 14. Oats. Oats are one of the more overlooked dietary sources of silica, a mineral that appears to work its way directly into the collagen scaffolding itself, rather than just assisting its assembly from the outside. Research on supplemental silicon in women with sun-damaged skin found measurable improvements in both skin roughness and elasticity over the study period. I want to be precise about that, because precision matters here. That study used a concentrated supplemental form, not a bowl of oatmeal. I'm not going to pretend they're identical. What I can tell you is that oats are a well-documented food source of bioavailable silicon, that the body processes it well from food compared to many supplement forms, and that food sources carry none of the risk profile that concentrated supplements sometimes do in people with kidney considerations or mineral sensitivities. Silica levels in the body also decline with age, which gives older adults a specific reason to pay attention to this one in a way younger people don't need to yet. The absorption of silicon from food also becomes less efficient as we get older, which compounds the issue. The body needs more from diet, just as diet is providing a proportionally smaller return. Foods like oats, barley, and whole grain cereals are among the more reliable dietary sources of bioavailable silicon in a standard Western diet. The problem is most people have swapped those whole grains for processed versions that have had the silica-containing outer layers removed along with everything else the refining process strips out. Steel-cut or rolled oats, eaten regularly, puts that back without any particular effort or expense. Just avoid the flavored instant packets with added sugar. I make mine most mornings with blueberries stirred in, which covers 2 items on tonight's list in a single bowl. Number 15. Cucumber. Cucumbers carry silica too, right alongside a water content above 90%, and that combination is more useful than it sounds. Collagen holds on to water as part of its actual structural chemistry. A dehydrated tissue sits looser, behaves differently under pressure, and shows the surface effects most people associate with aging skin. Cucumber won't correct dehydration on its own. Nothing dietary does that independently, but between the silica contributing to scaffolding structure and the water content supporting the surrounding tissue, it's a quietly useful food that almost nobody credits for anything beyond a garnish or a spa cliché. The hydration side of this matters more than it tends to get credit for in collagen discussions. The collagen matrix in skin is not a dry structure. It holds water as part of its architecture, and the way it behaves mechanically depends in part on how well hydrated that matrix is. Skin that consistently runs dry at the tissue level doesn't just look different on the surface. It behaves differently, stretches differently, and repairs differently than well-hydrated tissue does. A food that contributes to both the structural side and the water side at the same time is worth more credit than most people give it. Leave the peel on when you eat it. Most of the silica sits in and just under the skin, and peeling it off discards the most nutritionally relevant part. Store it cold. A cucumber left on a counter loses its water content faster than most people realize, and once that's gone, so is a good portion of what made it useful to begin with. I grow these on a trellis along the back fence so they climb instead of sprawling across the bed. Saves a remarkable amount of space for something that produces this generously. Last one tonight, back to the garden, to something green that I genuinely can't imagine my kitchen going without. Number 16. Dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, whichever grows best where you are. Leafy greens bring their own solid dose of vitamin C, back to the stitching process we started the whole video with, but they also carry lutein, a compound researchers have studied directly alongside lycopene for protecting skin from the UV-triggered collagen breakdown we covered back with the tomatoes. In a placebo-controlled crossover trial with 65 volunteers, lutein and lycopene both reduce the expression of the collagen-degrading genes that UV light normally switches on in human skin. Lutein, in other words, is doing the same defensive job as lycopene, using a different pigment and a different set of plant compounds. The mechanism appears to be distinct. Lutein does concentrate in skin tissue, and researchers have proposed it may work partly by intercepting UV energy before it triggers the downstream damage response, though the full picture is still being characterized. Lycopene, by contrast, is thought to work more through antioxidant activity after UV has already arrived at the tissue level. 2 different entry points into the same problem, which is why eating foods from both categories, tomatoes and greens, covers the protective angle more completely than either does alone, which means this one bag of greens is doing double duty, building and protecting at the same time, the same way broccoli did back at number 5. One note that matters specifically for this food: if you're on blood thinners like warfarin, leafy greens are high in vitamin K, and that interaction is well documented and clinically meaningful. It doesn't mean avoiding greens, it means keeping your intake consistent week to week, rather than swinging between none and a great deal, and making sure your prescribing physician knows roughly how much you're eating so your dosing is calibrated around it. I walk out most mornings before the fog is lifted off the beds, and there's a quiet out there I've never quite managed to describe properly, even after all these years. 16 plants, 16 different jobs, all of them pointed at the same repair. I find it genuinely hard to stand in a garden like that and not feel like the whole arrangement was put together with more intention than pure accident usually manages. That's 16. Let's bring it home. Now, 16 foods, 3 jobs. Some supply the rope, some tie the knots, some guard what's already there. Vitamin C ran through 6 of them: the peppers, guava, kiwi, broccoli, strawberries, oranges. Copper and zinc each had their own food, plus a scene about what happens when the two of them compete in your gut. Sulfur showed up in the garlic and the eggs, silica in the oats and the cucumber, and lycopene, anthocyanins, and lutein stood guard over what you'd already built, rather than helping build anything new. None of these work as well alone as they work together. That's the whole point of eating from a full plate instead of chasing a single ingredient. I'll say the doctor part one more time. If you're managing a chronic wound, a connective tissue condition, or joint disease with medication, talk to your physician before making significant changes to your diet. Food supports the body's own rebuilding. It doesn't replace medical care. It never will. If tonight helped you look at your kitchen a little differently, subscribing costs nothing and tells me to keep making more of these. I've got a full shelf of topics waiting: joint-specific foods, gut health, the medicinal plants most people are still pulling out of their yards without knowing what they had. Here's my garden fence question for tonight. Out of these 16, which pairing surprised you more? Copper and zinc quietly working against each other in your gut, or vitamin C and lycopene doing 2 completely different jobs on the exact same problem? Tell me in the comments, and tell me which one on tonight's list is already sitting in your kitchen without you knowing what it's been doing for you all along. Take care of that scaffolding. It's carried you further than you give it credit for. God bless you, and I'll see you back here in the garden soon.